Have you ever wondered why, no matter how many facts you give someone, they won't change their political views? What if I told you politics is not about facts, it's about moral intuitions? In this video, I want to describe why the difference in moral intuition leads to the divisions between the left and the right, and why they almost seem irreconcilable. My hope is that if we can understand how our intuitions inform the moral landscape, and then furthermore how that moral landscape informs the political landscape, we can both, one, have a better understanding of why we have these very diverse opinions of politics, but two, what we can do in face of this diversity, how we can come together to have better discussions to hopefully diagnose the problems that are facing us today. So I think the first thing to realize is that there's no such thing as a moral fact. In fact, I think the whole history of moral philosophy shows that it's been a failure to try and systematize morality into some kind of absolute rule. Instead, we need to think of morality as something that's dynamic and unfolding, where we can perceive these phenomena as they occur and react to them in turn based on what's good in a given circumstance. So to just put that broadly, there's a difference between the objective world of facts and the evaluative world of meaning and values, morality. To take that further, we need to realize that politics is always informed by the world of values. It's different from chemistry or physics. It's always going to be informed by the world of values and how we perceive that world of values. If you've ever taken a basic political science class in college, one of the first things you'll learn is that you need a methodology, a political framework to understand the phenomena that you're encountering. In some circumstances, maybe if you take on a Marxist perspective, you might be perceiving economic phenomena and the inequality between economic phenomena as primary. So you might be saying that inequality between classes of people is the primary thing you should be acknowledging. In a liberal framework, you might be saying that instead of any kind of communitarian or group politics, it's the individuals that need to be focused on and their inherent human dignity, their inherent human rights that they deserve. If you put values aside or economics aside, maybe you'll say that power is the most important phenomena within political science, and so you should be focusing on how power dynamics unfold. Whatever is correct is determined by the authority and the political power of a certain institution, a certain nation state, or between nation states. That's what political realism or postmodernism would argue. At this point, it doesn't matter which political framework you think is correct. It just matters to recognize that there's always a political framework that's used to understand what's more important or what's less important as far as the facts go in the political landscape. That's why politics is not like chemistry or physics. We can't just take the facts as they are. The facts always need to be interpreted. And that interpretive lens is the moral framework or the political theoretical framework that we're taking to understand any particular situation through. For that reason, philosophy, the humanities, and the rest of the social sciences, like psychology, are always deeply connected to politics. You can't divorce the humanities and the social sciences from the understanding of politics. There is no such thing as just understanding the facts. The facts are always up to some kind of interpretation. So speaking of psychology, let's turn to it to try and understand how people and their minds make sense of the world of values, morality, and how that instantiates into politics. What psychology tells us about morality and political orientation is that it's informed a lot by how you are raised, but even more so, what your innate genetic predispositions say about how you're going to interpret the world. One of the large theories of moral psychology is moral foundations theory by Jonathan Haidt. He's borrowing from David Hume in his understanding that emotions don't have their roots in our rationality, but instead they have their source in our emotional intuitions. Just like we have taste receptors for sweet, salty, or sour flavors, we also have these moral taste receptors, if you will, towards different political or moral phenomena. What he's identified is there's 5 different receptors or 5 different sensibilities that we have when we're encountering our moral landscape. First is care, second is fairness, third is authority, fourth is sanctity, and fifth is in-group, out-group dynamics. Care promotes the protection of individuals and condemns cruelty. Fairness promotes cooperation and discourages free riding. Loyalty or in-group dynamics promotes unity of individuals to their social groups. Authority enables social solidarity, and sanctity also enables group solidarity. What he's found is that individuals that prioritize care and fairness are more liberal. They don't care for authority, in-group, or sanctity dynamics. They care primarily for how fair and caring the society is towards all of its members. That's in contrast towards conservatives. That doesn't mean that conservatives don't care about fairness or harm principles. They do. But they care for them a little bit less, a little bit at the expense of authority, in-group, and sanctity dynamics. Another theory that complements this psychological perspective is personality dynamics and political orientation. Within personality dynamics and political orientation, personality psychologists have found that people that are more open to experience and more agreeable are more left-leaning, while as those that are more conscientious, more responsible, less agreeable, less open to experience, they're more concerned with authority, they're more concerned with in-group, out-group dynamics, authority, and sanctity of the group. What all of this moral psychology ends up telling us is that we have this innate way of seeing the world based on our personality, based on the way that we interpret our emotions, and that informs how we see particular phenomena. You can kind of think of it like having blue tinted glasses versus red tinted glasses. If you have blue tinted glasses, everything you perceive will be somewhat blue. If you have red, it'll be slightly red. Now, to make this even more palatable, and maybe to see its complexity a bit more and why it's not just up to rationality or intelligence, let's consider another example, the dress from 2015. So this dress, some people, roughly 50%, saw it as blue or black, and the other 50% of people saw it as white or gold. And how they perceived the dress was dependent on their assumptions of the lighting that the dress was under. If you were perceiving the dress as blue and black, you were perceiving that it was under warmer light. That's in contrast to the people that were perceiving it as white and gold. The people that were perceiving it as white and gold were assuming that the light was from the sun. And so we can see from that example, depending on your assumptions about the context of the situation and how you're coming to a particular phenomena, you would perceive it as 2 different things, blue or black, white or gold. And I would argue that's similar to our political and moral understandings, our presuppositions that we encounter the moral landscape with. If we're emphasizing care and fairness, we might see it more as a progressive phenomena. If we're emphasizing authority, sanctity, and in-group dynamics, we're going to see it as a more conservative phenomenon. Now, I think here's what's really interesting. There was a reality about the dress. The dress was objectively black and blue. No matter what information you give somebody about what the dress objectively is, they still are going to perceive it as white and gold. And I think that's what morality is like. Morality is so informed by our innate predispositions and our enculturation that we can't help but perceive things from a certain standpoint. There is no absolute understanding of what that phenomena is. It seems to be an unfolding process. So long as you're not a moral anti-realist, so long as you don't believe that morality is just up to pure interpretation and there is no discernible fact of the matter, if you believe that there is a distinction between right and wrong, good and bad, then that means there is something there to be perceived in the moral landscape. But the way that we perceive it isn't as easy as just turning to science or some higher authority. Now, you still might be saying, no, in that situation, my sight was still deceiving me. But politics, I can perceive the facts very clearly. I'm a very rational person. I have a high IQ. I can determine between right and wrong. And to that, I'll say, no, you can't. Now, why should I say that your rationality and IQ don't really matter? Because we're not rational intelligence-forming beings. And I think the best example of this is the Wasson selection test. The Wasson selection task is a simple, abstract, rational task to test how good we are at consequent logic. So this consequential statement says, if a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other side. Feel free to take a second to try and solve this task. If you got this task wrong, don't feel bad. Only 10% of people get it right. This is just to show that we suck at rationality. That's why we can learn all about weight loss or saving money and investing for the future, and yet the number of us that actually go through with any of that rationality is very, very low. We're going to continue acting on our emotional intuitions. So now back to politics. We need to understand that politics is up to our emotional, moral intuitions, and that those moral intuitions might be looking at the same set of facts, but we're interpreting them in different ways. So what's my take? I think we should look back at the Wasson selection test. So if you'll remember, only 10% of people could figure out the Wasson selection task by themselves. However, studies have shown that when people are put into groups of 4 and allowed to collaborate with each other to find the solution, their success rate goes up to 80%. I think that shows us that distributed cognition helps us make sense of complex problems. If we can talk to each other in constructive ways, then we're able to triangulate what the truth of a matter is. I think I'm going to also borrow from cognitive science here and say that there's also this phenomena of opponent processing. Opponent processing is the idea that you have one system that competes with another system, and that these two systems dynamically inform each other in a mutual and constrictive way to make sense of what the reality of a situation is. For an example, we use our senses of touch, taste, smell, and the rest of them to triangulate what a real phenomena is in the world. If it's only applying to one of our senses, we consider that more and more a hallucination. If it applies to all of our senses, then we consider that explanatorily powerful and therefore real within the landscape of reality. So, in the political and moral landscape, I think we innately have the left and the right dynamics. And these left and right dynamics help constrain and inform each other about what is real. They help check for the biases that the left or the right has. And when done correctly, they help identify the Aristotelian mean between those two extremes. I say Aristotelian mean because I don't mean that in every sense it's 50-50. It's not going to be 50% climate change, 50% local economic concern. In some sense, there is one perspective that might take more priority in that situation. That's the Aristotelian mean. It might be that short-term concerns take more priority, or it might be that long-term concerns take more priority. In either case, it's not 50-50, it's the two working dynamically with each other to determine what the right answer is. And so I'd ask anybody that's watching this right now, and anybody that you might know, to reflect. Are they always, or are you always, on one side of the political spectrum? Do you find yourself consistently and dogmatically, dare I say religiously, identifying with the left or identifying with the right? Or can you see that in some aspects the left has more credence or the right has more credence? I want to end this video with the lessons from the mystics of the spiritual traditions, as well as the greatest philosophers of ethics in the philosophical tradition. And that is to have humility, to see yourself in the other person, to recognize the flaws in yourself before the flaws in another, to enter into relationships with compassion and love rather than hate and judgment. If we can see that we have something to learn from others, then we can have moral and political progress, and we can find the truth dynamically and collectively.